Welcome to Unleash Facts, the place where history's secrets, unsolved mysteries, and mind-blowing truths come to light. In the early 1930s, an Austrian inventor named Viktor Schauberger stunned the world with his invention of an aircraft capable of vertical takeoff and landing, commonly known as a VTOL. At the time, this was considered impossible, but he proved everyone wrong by building and flying several of these machines in secret. These inventions were so advanced that they left the world baffled, so much so that the government decided to cover up his work and put him in a mental hospital. Why would they do this? What did they fear so much about this man's inventions? And how did he escape and live under a false identity for decades without anyone ever knowing who he really was? You are not allowed to copy, repost, or redistribute this content without permission. The first record we have of Viktor Schauberger is from World War I, when he served in the Austro-Hungarian Army Air Service. He was born in 1888, and during the war became an expert on aircraft engines and their efficiency. But it wasn't long before he began to question what he had been taught at university about how flight worked. As far back as 1923, he wrote an article called The Flying Wing and Its Possibilities, where he discussed new ideas for aircraft design based on the shape of a birdie's wing. This led to the development of the first cambered airfoil wind tunnel in Europe, which can be found today at the German National Museum of Aviation. He continued working for the military until 1934, when he was offered a position at an aircraft company called Heinkel. It was here that he built his first famous machine, the Egg One. He was inspired by the way a bird or an insect flies because they both use rotary wings. These wings allow them to take off vertically, fly backwards, and hover in mid-air. All things that were not possible with the airplanes of that era. After all, it took weeks to prepare the airfield for takeoff and land. Plus, planes could only fly forward, and if they wanted to turn around, they had to go all the way back to the starting point. In other words, all planes needed a runway. This is why Schauberger set out to create a plane that could fly anywhere at any time without an airfield or a pilot. He built the Egg One between 1934 and 1936, and when it was finally ready for testing, everyone was amazed. It looked like a giant yellow egg and was powered by two jet engines that drew their air from ducts along the body. This allowed it to hover like a helicopter, but also fly forward at speeds greater than those of modern fighter jets. It had no tail or wings, but could fly backwards too. The Egg One used the same type of rotary wings that you find on insects and birds. They are called ailerons and function by rotating the air around them. This creates lift, which is why the Egg One could fly vertically. Because of its vertical capabilities, the plane could land on top of buildings and take off from there. So unlike a regular airplane, it didn't need a long runway. Plus, since it had no tail, it could fly backwards without losing speed or altitude. Finally, it was fast enough to outrun any aircraft of its day. But perhaps what made the aircraft most impressive was that it had a very small wingspan compared to other planes at the time. This meant it could fly in areas where larger planes could not. Unfortunately, almost as soon as the Egg One flew, the German Air Ministry confiscated it and ordered Schauberger to stop working on VTOL aircraft. They apparently saw the potential threat they posed to traditional aircraft and wanted to keep this technology secret. But there's another theory about why they did this. Some say that the Nazi regime confiscated the plane because they believed it would make Adolf Hitler look weak. After all, Hitler had always bragged about Germany's advanced aircraft technology, which included the V-1 and V-2 missiles. By comparison, the Egg One looked like a child's toy. So Hitler ordered Schauberger to destroy it and never mention its existence again. That is, unless you want to spend the rest of your life looking through the window of a mental hospital. So Schauberger obediently destroyed the Egg one and returned to designing more conventional aircraft. But while working at Heinkel, he also developed a new type of engine called the Aileron, which was installed in several German bombers during World War II. Once the war was over, he was once again forbidden from working on VTOL aircraft, but he didn't care because now he was making money designing regular planes. He moved to Switzerland after the war and started his own company called Schaublin. One of his clients was the French company Sud Aviation, which hired him to improve the design of one of their helicopters. While working for Sud Aviation, he invented a new rotor system that made it easier for helicopters to take off and land on hillsides. This was done by changing the angle of the main rotor blades, which prevented them from hitting the ground. His invention saved many lives and earned him international recognition as a brilliant engineer. Throughout his career, he held over 20 patents and won numerous awards for his inventions. But despite all this, his name has been forgotten throughout history. Very few people know who he was or what he accomplished. This is probably because of the smear campaign against him by the CIA and the US Air Force. When the CIA learned about the Egg one, they sent an agent to retrieve it, but Schauberger refused to give it up. They then threatened him with jail time unless he handed it over, but he still refused. So the CIA started leaking false information about him to the press. They claimed he was insane and had built a death ray, a UFO, and a time machine. This was done to discredit him and prevent him from continuing his work on VTOL aircraft. After this, he went into hiding and lived under the false identity of Wilhelm Riedel. He avoided all contact with friends and family and even pretended that he was sick with dementia. For years, nobody knew who he really was or where he had been all this time. Then in 1972, he was found dead in a hotel room after taking an overdose of sleeping pills. It was ruled as a suicide, although many conspiracy theorists believe that he was silenced once again. There are rumors that the CIA had him killed so that he couldn't reveal any more secrets. But this is just a theory. In reality, we may never know what really happened to this brilliant inventor. However, some people think that his work was not only covered up by the CIA, but also by the Soviet Union. After all, they had their own version of the Egg one called the Kazarov Project. This was designed by a man named Vladimir Kazarov and was also considered impossible until it flew. Just like Schauberger, Kazakov was given a position at a major aircraft company called Tupolev. He spent years there designing various aircraft components until he was finally allowed to build his own project. It was similar to the Egg one, but used counter-rotating propellers instead of jet engines. It was able to take off and land vertically and was also fast enough to compete with modern fighter jets. The Soviets kept this aircraft top secret for many years, but eventually it was leaked to the press. The CIA heard about the aircraft and immediately launched Operation Paperclip to steal the plans. This mission involved bribing a Soviet scientist named Sergei Korolev with $10,000 to smuggle the blueprints out of the country. However, it turned out that Korolev had been feeding the CIA false information all along. He had been paid by the Soviets to lead the Americans on a wild goose chase. Viktor Schauberger was a true genius who was ahead of his time. He dared to dream of things that others thought impossible, such as vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. He risked everything to pursue his dreams, and in doing so, he changed the world forever. Although he may be gone, his legacy lives on in the hearts and minds of those who knew him and in the innovations that he left behind. His story is an inspiration to us all to never give up on our dreams, no matter how impossible they may seem. Want more mysteries and mind-blowing facts? Until then, Watch this video about the tragic story of Nikola Tesla, and we'll see you in the next story that time forgot. Stay curious.